Welcome to another edition of Maggie's Makeover, where I try to restore my 50-year-old MGB that hasn't run in over 40 years. Like, subscribe, and share the content so others who are contemplating a similar project can learn what to do and, more importantly, what not to do based on my mistakes. In this episode, Mechanic Steve is actually going to complete all the preparation work to pull Maggie's engine out of the car. Specifically, he's going to remove Maggie's starter and prepare her transmission to be pulled with the engine. He's going to drain Maggie's transmission oil, disconnect the electrical connections to the electronic overdrive, remove the speedometer cable, and remove the gearbox support. So let's check in with Mechanic Steve down at the garage. Now with the motor mounts out, it's time to disconnect the wires that go to the starter and the overdrive transmission. And so you're gonna see, if we look down here from this main loom of the wire harness, this one goes right here, goes down to the starter. I'll show you what that looks like underneath. And then this one comes out and it's followed back, get my hand out of here, it's followed back here, held in by a clip right here. And there's one other clip on the bottom side of this. So we've got to lift the car up, undo the connections from the starter, undo the P-clips up here, pull the wires from the overdrive transmission, and in fact, pull that whole wire harness forward and get it out of the way. We don't want it getting caught up as we pull the engine. Let me give you a look at what this looks like underneath the car. Okay, so here's a view of the starter. We're going to disconnect these wires. Now we're going to come around. I'm going to try to stay out of the picture. This is a 1/2-inch nut. You can sort of just grab. And spin. And now take it off. So now all those wires are disconnected. I'm going to be able to pull that up. I think there may be a P-clip holding that down, but we'll be able to now pull that part of the harness up and get it out of the way. Okay, so now that we have the electrical connections taken off of the starter, we're going to remove that. There's 2 bolts. See, this is the solenoid, the starter above. I believe there's a bolt here, which is a 9/16. There's another one on top. My thinking is it's probably easier to undo this one down here on the bottom, go up top of the car, undo that one, and then slide the starter out that way, and then tilt it up and take it out of the car from up above. So let me take this 9/16-inch socket. Now you don't want to confuse the bottom screw with the top screw, because I'm going to show you when we get up top, there's a coarse thread and a fine thread difference between these 2 screws. So let's go up above and take care of the screw on top. Okay, so this is up top on the engine looking down. We're going to remove the top screw on the starter, a 9/16. That's this bolt right here. There we go, screw is off. Now, I should be able to pull this out, rotate this up, get my hand out of the way, and just lift this up like this. And that is the starter and the solenoid, and now it's out. Okay, so here's a view underneath the car. Let me just get you oriented here. Here's a transmission cross member. This is the transmission, obviously, itself. You're gonna see that's the P-clip up there that holds the wire harness that came down up top that we need to free up. So I'm gonna remove this. You see I've grabbed it with a socket up above. We're gonna remove that. Before I remove these wires, I'm gonna get rid of this cross member to be able to drop this transmission down onto the subframe behind it. That should give me more room up here to reach. But of course, before we drop this transmission, this submember, and drop the transmission, we gotta go undo the gear shift lever. So let's undo this P-clip and we'll undo the one by the bell housing, and then we're gonna go take the gear shift lever out, and then that will leave us the follow-on work to do with the cross member that supports the transmission, and then to lower that. So let's grab a 7/16" socket. There we go. All right. So that's off. Sorry if I bumped the camera there. This should now just come right out. All right, so let's go up to the bell housing up above, and we'll remove the P-clip up there. Okay, so this is a look at the top. Here's that wire harness that we talked about, right? Here's the engine, obviously. The P-clip is back here on the bell housing. It is a, what size? It is a 3/8 inch. And so we're gonna go in here and take this out. I'm gonna try to stay out of your way. All right, that nut is off. I don't know if that was a lock washer or not, but I'm gonna put that nut back on here. All right, so that is the removing of the P-clip. So the only thing that's holding this on are the connections to the overdrive unit. Okay, so hopefully this gives you a view of the shifter. From what I've been told, there are 4 fasteners out here that will take this retaining clip out. We can then lift this up along with the boot, and underneath that there are a few more fasteners down there, and then we can just pull it right out. And there's the third one. Now, all the videos I've seen, you just pop this out. I said pop it out, yes. So there it is, so that's out. Okay, so before we begin any work on our transmission, we're gonna drain it. And so you can see, here's the transmission, there's the drain plug. I got a little catch basin right here to catch this. Oddly enough, the 11/16, I couldn't get to go all the way up on this. I don't know if that's because it's deformed, but I'm actually going with a 18 millimeter socket on this. It looks relatively clean. Very, very clean. I don't see any metal fragments coming out of there. That should be sufficient. Okay, so now that the two P-clips for the wire harness that has all the electrical connections to the transmission, now that those are undone, we need to disconnect all of those connections. Also, I showed you the ones in the front. I want to show you there are some in the back. See them up there, the yellow wires, and then the one that comes down here to the overdrive. Those need to be disconnected as well. Again, they're pretty high up. So the way we're going to approach this is we're going to take the transmission cross member off. We're going to support it first, undo these 4 bolts on either side. If we come around here, you're going to see that there's another, these 2 bolts actually hold an additional piece of this cross frame that has the cradle. These are the 2 rubber mounts. And then this cross frame is actually attached by 2 bolts here to the transmission. There's 2 others that are actually on the back as well. So if we drop this transmission down, and so it's supported, just come back here on this other part, this other cross member frame, it'll just kind of hang right there. That's going to allow us to not only undo these 4 bolts, right, greater access, but also go up and all those electrical connections will be down closer to us, and we can then remove those. So let me get the camera set up and give you a better angle of this and get to work. Okay, so before we actually do anything with the cross member and removing that and dropping the transmission, we need to undo the speedometer cable. I think you got a pretty good shot in here. That's right here. There's a knurled surface to it. I actually took a pair of pliers. Don't know if that's the right way to do it, but that loosened it up. And now I can get in here with both hands and spin this freely. It just pulls right out. We'll put that over there. Okay, so you see I have a floor jack here. It's underneath with a block of wood. I have it underneath the transmission cross member. And now I'm gonna undo these 4 bolts that hold that up on either side. And once those are done, we're gonna gently lower this transmission back down onto here. Okay, so those 4 are out. Now we're gonna drop this gently, the transmission, and have it come to rest actually right here. And what I've done, I've pushed these bolts back, right, that held the drive shaft, and I've put a zip tie on them. I want to hold them as close back in as I can, because when we remove the engine, I don't want them dragging on this frame. All right, moment of truth. Let's lower, gently lower this transmission. Okay, looking from the sort of rear of the transmission and overdrive, you can see that we're resting very nicely on this cross member of the car. And then with this transmission now lower, you see I have a lot of room to actually get up there and take those wires off. If I can get this to focus on it. Yeah, on those right there. If I come around to the other side where we took that P-clip off, there, the wires to the transmission and overdrive are all right there. Okay, so we're looking at the front view of the cross member. And as I mentioned, there were these 2 bolts that sit between this, here's the cross member. That looks like there's another piece of the cross member in here, metal. These are some pads, right, that hold it in. We have to undo this piece, which is connected to the overall cross member from the transmission. There's 2 bolts up here and 2 bolts at the back. Let me see if I can get these. Now, I'm going to use a box head wrench and just turn them this way. Maybe I can get a socket in there. Let me see if I can get a 1/2 inch socket in there with maybe a flexible coupling and an extension. This might work better. Let's see if I can get something like this in here. Yeah. There's a second one. These have lock washers as well. Why don't I set the camera up on the back side? I think these are going to be the more problematic ones, but let's get a camera angle from the back and see if we can get those out. Okay, so this is in the rear of the transmission cross frame. We took the 2 out in the front. There's one in there. I don't know if you can see it. Let me see if I can get the light from my head on it. And what I'm going to do, I don't know if this is the right way or the wrong way, but I'm probably getting new motor mounts. I'm just going to take this cross frame, move it, little rubber motor mounts, get a wrench in there. There you see, that's out. Now I've got one on the other side. Let me get you the camera angle on that. This is on the passenger side of the transmission cross member. Oh, there goes one of the bolts. Another one. I'm just going to pull this back. And there it is. But the cross frame is out, those 2 bolts, and that leaves the transmission right there. Okay, so the last thing we're going to do, which I've already done, I pulled the part of the wire harness that goes to the transmission and overdrive. I actually pulled that forward out of the way, as well as the speedometer cable. I've taken both of those things and just picked an arbitrary point on the side of the car inside here, the coil, and I zip tied both those things to them. You don't want them getting in the way when you're going to pull the engine. And so now I think we've got to raise this hood, right? Make some room for the engine hoist and get that positioned. And then I think we're gonna get Maggie's motor out. So that's a wrap on this episode of Maggie's Makeover, where mechanic Steve actually completed all the work to prepare Maggie's engine to come out of the car. Tune in to the next episode of Maggie's Makeover, where a good friend and racing buddy of mechanic Steve's by the name of Kevin Boland stops into the garage to help him pull that engine out of Maggie. The interesting side note about the next episode is that neither of these 2 guys have actually pulled an engine out of a car. So it'll be pretty interesting to see if they can succeed with the task at hand. Until then, on behalf of Maggie and I, happy motoring. Okay, so here's a view of the starter. We're going to disconnect these wires. And since electricity is not my forte, I think I might be able to turn this now. No, every time I say I think it's loose enough to be able to turn, it never ends up that way. You know, my knee is down here on the seat and I'm looking into the car, and I gotta tell you people, there's a lot of rat feces in here. It's a long way off from being a daily driver. That's half the fun though, right? Half the fun. What does that mean? He's gonna remove the start. Last take, I promise. The last fucking take of this.